spotted grunter. They're an incredible but also very frustrating fish to target on lure. They feed in shallow water and have incredibly developed senses, and they'll humble you very, very quickly. Most people give up on them way before they crack the code, and I like to attribute this to not using the correct gear. Now I know there's tons of grunter videos out there already, but most of them focus on building general estuary setups, and there's a lot of brand polishing involved there as well. Today we're going to look at how to set up a proper finesse grunter system built from the ground up. Welcome back to the channel, and this is Grunter Fishing with Lures Part 1. In today's episode we're going to cover the 4 basics to build a successful grunter setup. Firstly, rods, reels, leaders and lines. Now the setups we're going to look at today can be used either from the bank, a kayak or a boat. They're all transferable across the various platforms. Let's start out by looking at rods. Now in my opinion, 90% of anglers fish with rods that are too heavy for their application. We tend to build rods around contingencies. What if I hook into a big cob or a big leery? Building your setup around a contingency is the fastest way to ruin your grunter fishing game. We generally have 2 types of rods. Tubular tips, easily identifiable by a faster action and a stiffer tip. These rods are preferred when fishing with soft plastics or drop shot and micro jigs because you want to impart a direct action onto your lure. They also tend to cast a lot better than the other kind of rod. The other rod we can look at is a solid tip rod, often identified by the different color tip. This is actually an additional tip glued into the blank. These are preferred when fishing small topwaters or crankbaits because this acts as a shock absorber, not to bend out small assist hooks or small trebles. Now before we get into brands and models, we need to establish the basics of what we're looking at in a rod. My recommendation is a 7-foot rod as a minimum with a casting weight of 5 to 15 grams. This will keep things light enough for you to be able to put a finesse presentation forward, but also give you enough backbone to pull a big fish if it does come along. Moving on to brands and models. You can look at the Okuma LRF, Sensation Power Plus, one of my personal favorites, the Nobi Keen Force, as budget options. Now a lot of these rods come in both solid and tubular tip versions. Just make sure you know exactly which one you are buying. If you want something more premium and you want to step up your game a little bit, you can look at things like the Assassin Infinity. I believe this is possibly the best ultralight and finesse rod we have available in the South African market at this time. I would suggest the ultralight, the light and the medium light. Major Craft offers a rod called the Black Porgy, which is very well suited for this, and if you want to get the cream of a crop, you can look at a Ripple Fisher Real Crescent. These are not available locally, but can be imported from Japan. What do you get when you step up in rod class? You get lighter blanks, better guides, better components, and a better connection to your lure and your fish. So if you want to do this dedicated and proper, I do suggest you eventually look at getting a higher class setup. Now, let's dive into reels. I will, however, recommend that we stay away from the ultra budget options out there. Very often these reels have got terribly tuned drag systems, bad line lay, and unfortunately they just don't make the cut that we're looking for in a dedicated grunter reel. I prefer to fish reels from 2000 to 3000 sizes. only really utilizing the 3000 sizes in systems where there are exceptionally large fish or bycatch of large cob and garrick are common, like for say the Breda River. Something that I don't think is emphasized enough is the use of shallow spools. Now, this is exactly what the name suggests. Although the body and gearbox are the same size, the spool generally holds half of the amount of line. Now, honestly, you do not need 300 meters of braid to fish for grunter. What you do need is a finely tuned drag system, perfect line lay, and a good smooth reel. Something very important we have to cover as well is gear ratio. I personally prefer to fish a standard or a slower gear ratio while fishing for grunter because most of the movements are finesse and rather slow action. If you're fishing an extra high speed gear ratio, you might just move your lure out of the strike zone way too quickly. The following is how I classify the different reel options available to us, keeping in mind that we're excluding the extreme budget options for the reasons mentioned earlier in the video. At our entry level, we're looking at reels like the Okuma ITX, the Shimano Ultegra, and we can also put the Shimano Nasky in there, keeping in mind that both the Ultegra and the Nasky have received a recent update in 2025. Moving along to our mid-spec, and this is really where I would suggest you start looking at. We've got the Nobi Infinite SW and the legendary Shimano Stratic. Now both of these reels are not shallow spool versions, and like I mentioned, these are the kind of reels I'd fish in a system where larger fish are present. And really the cream of a crop, and if you want to spoil yourself, we can look at Shimano Vanfords, Twin Powers, and even Stellas. These reels have impeccable line lay, the most advanced drag systems out there, and they will serve you for years to come. Now let's talk about line, often the most overlooked part of this entire system. This is something we cannot cheap out on. I often see people buy a really good rod, a decent reel, and then buy a very bad quality braid just to finish the combo off. Bad braid retains water, it doesn't cast well, and it's noisy through your guides. Focus on getting a quality PE rated braid and forget about the poundage on the packet. I recommend a minimum of an 8-strand braid, anywhere between PE 0.4 and PE 0.8. Personally, I meet that in the middle, and I normally fish with a PE 0.6. That is anywhere between 8 and 11 pounds. With high quality Japanese and imported braids, we often gain the advantage of getting a few extra pounds per PE, but don't let that be the deciding factor for your braid choice. I also like fishing high visibility braids, either multicolor, yellow or white, because when fishing with soft plastics or micro jigs, very often the bite detection is key and the bites will happen on the fall or the flutter of the lure. To put the finishing touches on part 1 of this series, we need to identify a leader material. We've got two choices, monofilament and fluorocarbon. Both have advantages and disadvantages. Monofilament offers more stretch and floats. Fluorocarbon has a higher abrasion resistance and sinks. So, if I'm fishing with a topwater lure, I'll gravitate towards monofilament. If I'm fishing sinking lures or subsurface lures, I'll fish with fluorocarbon. Very important is that you need to learn how to tie a proper FG knot. It offers almost 100% knot strength, and when you're fishing with these finesse lines, normally between 8 and 12 pound leading material, you need all the knot strength you can get. If the FG is too much effort or too difficult for you to learn, you can fall back on a double uni knot. Just make sure your knots are properly lubricated and properly tied, not to lose that trophy fish. Alright, that wraps up part 1 of our Fishing for Grunter with Lures series, covering rods, reels, lines and leaders. Let's have a quick recap. Rods, something around 7 foot, lighter than what most people are using. Reels, 2 to 2,500 size shallow spool with a good smooth drag system. Lines, a good quality 8 strand as a minimum, anywhere between 0.4 and 0.8 PE. Moving on to our leading materials, fluorocarbon or monofilament, around 8 to 12 pounds depending on the type of lure you're using. In part 2, we're going to get to the fun stuff: lure selection, colors, retrieves, how and where to fish with specific lures. If you found this content helpful, please consider subscribing if you haven't. Drop a like and let me know in the comments what your current grunter setup is. I'll see you in part 2. Cheers!